All right, Mark and John, I think we'll make a start here. So we have a bunch of people. There'll be some arriving in a few minutes, but we'll make a start. Welcome everyone to the latest Horizon 3 Healthcare Investing webinar hosted by Horizon 3 Fund and sponsored and conducted by FB Rice and Monsoon Communications. This webinar is being recorded and you've all seen the disclaimer upon registration. Today, we're very fortunate to have two experienced biotech sector executives, Jon Pilcher and Mark Pachacz. Little bio on each. Jon joined Neuren in 2013 as CFO and was appointed CEO in May 2020. He has played a central role in all aspects of Neuren's R&D, commercial and corporate activities. Before Neuren, he was a member of the leadership team at Acrux, its IPO, FDA approval of 3 novel pharmaceutical products, and a transforming licensing deal with Eli Lilly. Jon formerly spent 7 years in the R&D and corporate functions of international pharmaceutical groups Medeva and Celtec. It might be Medeva, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, Jon. How do you pronounce that?
No, Medeva's right.
Medeva. Jon is a chartered accountant and holds a degree in biotechnology from the University of Reading in the UK. He's also a non-executive director of ASX-listed BTC Health. Thank you, Jon. Mark Pachacz is a co-founder and editor of Bioshares, a magazine that I hope we're all subscribers to, an investment newsletter that covers Australia's biotech sector. Bioshares has been in publication for almost 23 years now. Mark is also the organiser of the annual Bioshares Biotech Summit, which is a fabulous meeting of our sector. Today, we'll be discussing, surprise, surprise, Neuren and the current ASX biotech market. So please use the Q&A function on your Zoom screen anytime, and we will address as many of those questions as possible after we answer the pre-submitted questions, of which there are 6. First, a quick map on the horizon where I comment on some of the important developments locally and internationally impacting our sector and thus investment objectives. So in local news, certainly the Victorians would have seen that BioNTech and the German biotech that's been in the news the last couple of years unveiled a deal with Victoria to prop up a new mRNA research and innovation centre to bolster investigation of new medicines from discovery to delivery. BioNTech will also include one of its Bion Trainer, a mobile manufacturing facility, or is that Biontainer? I'm not sure, in Melbourne for an end-to-end clinical production of mRNA products and candidates. The deal, Resap Health, has been acquired by Pfizer for 180 million Aussie dollars, I believe that is. So that's been on the cards for quite a while, and I think that offer went up and up, so well done to those investors. Eisai and Biogen announced positive phase 3 results for lecanemab in treating, I've got Parkinson's disease here. I think it was Alzheimer's. Yeah. Which augurs well for Cogstate. And Eisai will now seek to file the therapy for full approval with the FDA by the end of March. Eisai will use Cogstate's electronic cognitive test battery to help identify potential patients for treatment under a $45 million deal signed in 2020 between the two companies.
And if I can just cut in there, I think that's a huge development there in the Alzheimer's disease space and in drug development in general.
It is, and I was speaking with who's the other Alzheimer's, Actinogen, and they're also using Cogstate. So it's very, that's why I raise it here. It's very good news for Cogstate and Alzheimer's on both fronts. In international news, Allogene Therapeutics Inc., a clinical stage NASDAQ-listed biotechnology company developing allogeneic CAR T products for cancer, recently announced the initiation of a phase 2 clinical trial for ALLO-501A in patients with relapsed refractory large B-cell lymphoma. And Israel-based Novocyte's CureSight technology has been cleared by the FDA, allowing the eye tracking device to be used by children in the US to treat their reduced vision or lazy eye. It consists of a pair of red-blue treatment glasses that users wear while viewing any streamed video content of their choice on a tablet. Relying on calculations from algorithms and eye tracking technology, the system blurs the center of vision in the images being broadcast to the user's stronger eye, encouraging the other eye to focus and work in tandem with the stronger eye to fill out the details of the image. So I know lazy eye is quite a prevalent condition. And after an indefinite commercial delay on its Shire-acquired rare disease drug, Takeda's years-long Natpara manufacturing saga is drawing to a close, negatively, unfortunately. The Japan-based pharma has elected to stop all manufacturing of its Natpara injection for hypoparathyroidism in the US and abroad by the end of 2024. Decision it credited to unresolved supply issues that are specific to the product. And while Takeda has been tight-lipped about some of its more recent Natpara production hang-ups, the company in its latest release spoke candidly about its continued battle with particle formation unique to Natpara, rubber and otherwise. So it just goes to show, even once you've got a product on market, there can be issues, particularly in manufacturing. Okay. Now to our panelists. Jon, can I start with you? For the members of the audience who don't follow Neuren closely, can you tell us about your lead programs and the most recent developments with respect to the FDA?
Sure, thanks Matt, and good morning everyone. So just a quick bit of background. So Neuren's developing 2 drugs to treat serious neurological disorders that emerge in early childhood, affect just about every aspect of life. So walking, talking, eating, sleeping, breathing, hand use, no approved treatments, massive emotional and financial burden on the patients and their families for life. So that's what Neuren's trying to do something about. And very exciting, we are very close to the end now with the first one, and that's our drug trofinetide to treat Rett syndrome, which is one of these neurological disorders, affects almost exclusively girls. So we've partnered that with Acadia Pharmaceuticals, and a US company for North America. Acadia completely funded and executed the phase 3 program. And in July this year, they filed a new drug application with the FDA for treatment of Rett syndrome in people aged 2 years and older. We were delighted that I think it's probably 3 weeks ago now, we got news back from the FDA that they'd formally accepted the application and that they'd granted it priority review, which means a 6-month review rather than the typical 10-month review. And that set the PDUFA date, which is the date for a decision, as the 12th of March, 2023. So incredibly exciting for us. That's now our D-Day. And they also noted that they don't plan to hold an advisory committee meeting prior to that decision. They don't need to do that, and there's no significant issues identified so far. So couldn't really have got a better outcome from their initial review of the application. I wasn't surprised, to be honest, because I felt that's what it should get, given what had been submitted and given the story that the data tells. But as you all know, with the FDA, it's very nice to see it in writing and have it confirmed. So it's been a long journey for us in Rett syndrome, and now we can't wait to get to March, just to hopefully have the first drug ever approved to treat Rett syndrome.
Hey Jon, can I cut in there? What do you make of that, of the FDA not requiring an advisory committee for that drug application? Yeah,
it's an interesting one. I to be honest, I wasn't worried if we had one, because I felt again that the data and the support of the community would see a positive result out of it. But I didn't expect there to be one, to be honest. And I think from my point of view, I think when you see advisory committees, it's often that there's something not quite right with the data, or the trial design is a bit unusual, or you haven't quite met the endpoints, and you've done extra analysis and sort of filed for approval even without the hitting the original objective, or there's something just something controversial about it. And I didn't feel we were in that situation. I felt we pre-specified everything with the FDA. Co-primary endpoints, a much higher bar than normal. we'd done exactly what we were supposed to do, and all the data is consistent as well. So I didn't feel there was a need for a committee, and you know, it certainly seems that the FDA has agreed with that.
Yeah, well, congratulations to the team. So, John, what are the expected economics for Neuren if trofinetide is approved, or should I say when trofinetide is approved by the FDA?
Yeah, so, you know, this shows what a momentous year it is for us next year, hopefully. So we already earned $10 million from Acadia for the acceptance of that application. So that'll be coming to us shortly. The next milestone payment under the agreement is $40 million, and that comes on first commercial sale. So if they get approval in March next year, I'd expect that, you know, that to follow soon after. There's another nice kicker that they have rare pediatric disease designation, which means that on marketing approval, they'll get awarded a priority review voucher, which is this tradable instrument that other companies will buy. The last 5, I think, that have sold have gone for $110 million, and under the deal, we get 1/3 of whatever the market value is. So if it went for 100, we'd get $33 million. So I'd expect that to come next year as well. I fully expect Acadia to monetize that. So that's before sales, really, and then we get double-digit percentage royalties on sales, and then there's up to $350 million of milestone payments depending on sales targets. So there's 4 escalating thresholds of annual sales, and as you hit each one, we get paid a milestone payment, and the potential is $350 million. Beauty of all of this, we don't pay anything on to anyone else, so it all goes straight to pre-tax profit for us. So as you can imagine, completely transforming hopefully next year. And then there's one other element of the value to us which shouldn't lose sight of, is that part of the deal was that so Acadia got North American rights, we kept hold of ex-North America and the ability to use all of the data that they've generated to seek approval in other countries.
That's
so
great.
we're right in the middle of a process now to a lot of interest from companies wanting to commercialize it. So we're in the middle of a process now, funneling that interest down to a shortlist, and then, you know, the best outcome. So I'd expect more cash flow coming to us from that as well.
So John, just on the priority voucher, when you said
Yeah.
a third will come to you, who's paying you that third?
So Acadia, yeah. So
right.
So,
okay.
sorry,
Yeah.
Acadia will get awarded the voucher, but
Yeah,
under the deal terms, they have to pay us a third of whatever they realise for it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that you most likely will not need to raise further capital again, you know, should this approval happen?
Yeah, I mean, given all that, no, that's right. Yeah, we'll have plenty of funding, that's for sure. So.
Now, you also have a second drug in phase 2 trials for 4 indications. Please tell us what you are looking for from these trials and what the future strategy is for these programs.
Yeah, so this is a really important part of our story. So the second drug, NNZ-2591. I mean, I feel, you know, to have the near-term cash flows from the Rett syndrome product, but then the big potential upside in value from the follow-on programs across multiple indications, and we hold on to global rights, which is really important. You know, we hold on to those US rights for that. So it's a really important part of our story, as I'm always saying. And the other nice position we're in here is that we've learned so much from the Rett syndrome program, and these other programs are very similar. And so we've got the beautiful benefit of hindsight, where we can, all the things we think we could have done better, we're putting that to work in these next programs, moving much faster than the Rett syndrome program. So we're running phase 2 trials in 3 indications at the moment. So Phelan-McDermid syndrome, Angelman syndrome, and Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, and with a 4th Prader-Willi syndrome that we still need to get the IND open before we can start that. So the idea here is as fast as possible to generate the information we need to design registration trials. So these phase 2 trials are not trials where we're going to try and persuade a regulator to approve it. These are information gathering trials to then design the registration trials. So we're treating for 13 weeks, a decent length of time, kids as the first patient population. So giving the drug the maximum chance to speak. The dose is informed by a dose ranging study, extensive study that we did in the Phelan-McDermid syndrome model. So we feel confident about that. And so the important thing we're doing at the same time is doing the phase 3 preparation in parallel. So all the non-clinical studies you've got to do for long-term treatment, the manufacturing scale up, that's all happening as we speak while the trials run, because one of the learnings from RET was that we had a massive gap between end of phase 2 and start of phase 3 because we hadn't had the financial capability to be able to do any of that during phase 2. So I think the whole idea here is to build for this hopefully big moment next year where trofinetide hopefully gets approved, that cash flow starts coming to us, and then if we get positive results in these trials across these 4 indications, and it's a very deliberate strategy to go after them in parallel, they're all equally worthy and equally attractive opportunities. If we get that, then I think we're going to have some real attractive options of what we do next, be it go further with 2591, be it partner in some form, or there are big companies who've passed on the process for trofinetide ex North America because we don't have those US rights. Acadia's got them, but they're all saying they want to talk to us after phase 2 data in 2591. So after a very long journey for most of the management team, we can't wait, for all this to play out next year. So.
Oh, good. That's very exciting. John, there are a bunch of questions, pre-submitted questions, which I will ask you later, and you may have covered off some of that material, but we'll come to them in a minute. But now moving to Mark. So we're going to talk generally now. The market has been very disappointing this year, except for Neuren and just a few others. In your opinion, what should the investors be expecting in the next 6 months?
Thanks, Matt. I think it's just going to remain challenging. I think the war in the Ukraine is, that's still a big question of what happens there. That could get worse there. So it's been a difficult 6 months, and it's going to continue to be difficult. I think there's an opportunity to look out for some good quality assets at cheap prices. 3 stocks that I really like at the moment. One of them those is Pharmaceuticals, particularly interested in their product their drug candidate 6302 for the treatment or removal of scars. Another company which is sort of flying under the radar a little bit, Anteris Technologies. They're developing an aortic stent, a really exciting company. Have a look at our last edition, and I think it'll be on their website as well. And a quiet one, LBT Innovations, just a small company out of Adelaide. It looks pretty inexpensive at the moment, and they're looking at doing sort of a step change in sales in the next year of their devices or the instruments. They sold 7 this year, so if they can get to 2025 next year, that's going to be a completely different company. Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Okay, well, thank you. So that may or may not answer the next question. I was going to ask you, what are some of the biotech stocks that have held up better than others? So you can talk about those 3 as to whether they've held up. I mean, clearly Neuren has, because it just keeps delivering on milestones and improvements of commercialization. But are there any others that you felt have held up better than others, and why have these companies held their price or improved?
Yeah, the companies that have done well have really been event driven, I think. I mean, look at obviously ResApp, which has been acquired, their share price has gone up. Cogstate's went up about 50% on the results from its partner from Eisai. Neuren doing exceptionally well with the FDA review approaching. Telix doing well. Still, it's probably down about 30% of its all-time high, but just a quality company. There are companies that it's quality companies that investors are saying they're cheap and they've started to be attracted to those companies. So SomnoMed is one company that's bounced back in recent months, as has Imricor. Yes, there are a few stocks for people to look out for.
Brilliant, thank you. And now I need you to put on your Nostradamus glasses. When would you envisage the IPO window to open back up?
Well, that's easy. It's not there at the moment. I think, look, having covered this sector for a long time, it tends to go in these 5-year cycles, which has started from when the biotech sector began in about 1986 from the synthetic manufacture of insulin. And what happens is you get all this activity, all this excitement, and billions of dollars gets raised, and then they go away for 5 years and they go and develop progress their products, and then they get the results. The fruit of that labour is born, and then you get the next wave. So it's really goes in these 5-year cycles, which makes sense. Where you get your money, all the euphoria comes in, the money comes in, and then it's head down, tail up for 4 years, and then the next wave comes in. So if you think that the last cycle started in start of 2020, then you're probably looking another couple of years, end of 2024, where you're maybe looking at the next bull wave, so the next rising tide, which will be when a lot of easy money will be made. But up until then, look, once again, depending on the war in the Ukraine, whether that escalates or not, but it's the next 6 to 12 months still going to be challenging, and really just really stock specific companies that are, Neuren will be one of those. In March they get a decision whether trofinetide is approved or not. That'll go up, that'll go down. One or the other won't stay where it is. But certainly the macro cycles, something just to be a bit patient with in biotech. Just wait. You need to wait that out and get through these sort of times where it is more difficult to make money.
Well, that honest bearish sentiment is going to hurt a lot of boards and executives. So what advice can you give these biotech boards, executives out there who will need to raise cash in the next 6, 12, 24 months?
Well,
use it wisely.
Yeah, look, some of those companies may have been asleep at the wheel and not have raised enough money when it was it was a really easy time to raise funds. They may need to start to get a little bit more innovative, some strategic funding. We saw Micro X raise. They're raising $15 million through a strategic partner. ATMs at the money funding sources, companies like Acuity in Perth, which provide that. Or innovative capital raises like the type that Dimerix and Antisense have done, where they raise part of the money now, and then they've got a second tranche, which is based on clinical trial results. So, and also companies need to be cutting costs, and we've seen companies cutting costs. Exopharm, MicroX, quite a few companies in the sector are cutting costs, acknowledging that there is a period of next couple of years that's going to remain challenging for them.
Yeah, there's some good tips there, and also some good lessons from companies that have done it well. So thanks for that, Mark. Now we're going to take additional questions from the audience. So just a reminder, please use the Q&A button down the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit your questions. There are a few pre-submitted questions, as I mentioned, and apologies if we don't get to all of them. The first 5 are actually to you, Jon. There's 3 questions from Douglas. If Acadia receives approval for Rett syndrome, will they immediately move to phase 3 trials for Fragile X? Can they delay indefinitely? Can Neuren move to the license a different pharma company outside North America to move forward on Fragile X?
Yeah, so the short answer to the last part is that no, we can't. So under the agreement, there were certainly measures we could have taken to take it back if they hadn't progressed Rett syndrome, which of course they have, absolutely, sort of ears pinned back. So we're in their hands for Fragile X, and they've made no comments about that. I suspect they're going to, which again suits our purpose really, they're going to put all their efforts and resources into making absolutely sure of a successful commercial launch. So yeah, it's a wait and see.
And then you may have answered this question. There are 4 phase 2 trials underway for 4 different afflictions. Are there other diseases you have in mind which might be the subject of phase 2 trials after these results are known? Any plans?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that is a little bit different. So yeah, I mean, these neurodevelopmental disorders, we've chosen the 4 that we think are the most attractive initial targets, but there are loads of them, loads of different mutations that cause different disorders, and more is being learned about them all the time. I think if we get a positive result in these 4, I think there's definitely a prospect that we could treat more than these 4. So that is something that we are looking at right now. I'm not going to say anything specific about any of them, but yes, definitely watch this space.
Could be a very busy program. Because the numbers of patients with Rett syndrome are relatively small in this computer age, is it possible that for the rest of world Neuren could promote and sell trofinetide directly to these rest of world patients from a distribution centre here in Australia and cut out the middleman and all the sales and marketing efforts internationally?
Yeah, not really for this sort of product. I mean, it's a high price product. It's got to be funded by governments mainly outside the US. Needs to be done under the orphan drug designation program. So no, that's not really possible for this sort of product.
Yep. Miles asks 2 questions. Can you provide an update on the enrolment for 2591 for the 3 open phase 2 programs?
Yeah, I'm not going to provide numbers, but we will give a more formal update in due course. But what I will say is very happy with the sort of excitement there is in those 3 communities. It's Angelman in Australia and Phelan-McDermid and Pitt Hopkins in the US. So we've got more than enough patients identified. The way the trial works from a safety point of view, and we had to do this, to get the FDA's buy-in. It's a cautious start where you have to start with some older kids and then move to some younger kids and then move to the youngest kids and sort of check the safety at each stage. And we've also got to up titrate the dose. So it's quite a painful sort of sequential, slow process to start with, but we've got lots of patients ready to go down the track. So that's probably about as much as I say now, but we'll give a more formal update as in due course.
Yep, thank you. And then the second part of Miles's question, the rest of world Rett, any update on securing a partner for trofinetide?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about that, I think, in my earlier comments. I'm probably not going to say anything else other than, we feel our position is only getting stronger, to be honest, leading into the PDUFA date. So we're not in a mad rush to sign the wrong deal. So we are, we're taking this very carefully, but happy with where we are at the moment. That's about as much as I'll say.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. And now Michael asks or comments and asks, ASX-listed life science companies are increasingly making announcements for the sake of making an announcement. Execution of service agreement with a CMO, CRO to perform a service, submission of an HREC application, and the progression from one dose level to the next in a phase 1 clinical trial are some examples, to name a few. Why are more and more companies doing this? My observation is that there is pressure from boards and executive teams to keep the news up. And I agree with Michael in that some of the announcements that are being made are not very useful to investors, but there is just pressure to keep the name of your company in front of prospective investors or current investors. And I thought the ASX was going to crack down on that a little bit, but it's not really appreciated by anyone as far as I'm concerned. But I've seen it personally. There is pressure from boards to get news out there. So maybe, John, I won't ask you about your board, but Mark, are you seeing this as well? And what's your perspective?
Look, see, to some degree, I can understand. There's a paucity of developments in biotech, in drug development and medical device development, so companies need to keep the news flow out there. But companies that that do over-release, they run the risk of a bit of the boy cried wolf, and they've actually got something important to say, and people, the investors or analysts, will just think it's another non-key announcement. So you can get to the end of an announcement and you sort of waste 15 minutes reading something that you probably didn't need to be on top of.
And
John, you're certainly not guilty of this. So have you got any comments to make?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Lots of different thoughts here. I think I'm not sure it's always just a push from the companies. I feel, these days, everyone tends to like a lot of communication, but small bites of it. I mean, you know what it's like. So I feel in some respects, it's investors wanting to know what's going on the whole time. but that's a different thing from having a long ASX announcement that overplays what it is. So it's tricky because the ASX system doesn't really align with the sort of the Twitter style thing. I think interesting you mentioned ASX. I mean, I've known examples where they've where they've stopped someone making a particular announcement, and then someone else has made the same type of an announcement. So you can't possibly have it where they're not having any level playing field. So I think that's an issue that would need to be resolved.
That's an interesting observation.
Hey, Matt, I'll also say that I came across a company recently. It's a company I actually really like. I won't say who it is, but they were actually guilty of the opposite, and they actually weren't providing enough information. They were doing clinical studies, and they said, well, giving sort of press releases that are 2 paragraphs long about an important clinical study. And I said, what are you doing? You need to be providing a lot more. It's really exciting what you're doing. There's a lot of development going on there. You need to be providing more. I know it's surprised by my response. So yeah. I guess both are occurring.
So Mark, again, I think there's nothing wrong with telling people what you're doing, as long as you tell it as it is, and you're right, has the right level of detail. So there may be some things that don't require any detail, and there are others that require a lot of detail, and you've got to get that right. Whereas I think often people try and over embellish everything, when you don't really need to.
Well, this company's based overseas, and as an analyst, if you're getting 2-paragraph press releases, it's quite hard to actually get information. And when you've got to organise a certain time via Zoom with someone in North America, you can sort of, which I did at one point, just to let it go because there were other companies to write about.
Yeah, no, that's good feedback, guys. Mark, for you, Michael asks, do you have a view on EMV, Vision? Share price, market cap doesn't seem to reflect longer-term value proposition. I think a lot of CEOs would say their company falls into that bucket, but anything specific on EMV?
Oh, look, I'm not a big fan. I just think it's a really challenging technology, using microwave technology to diagnose blood clots accurately. I wish them luck, but I just think it's technically really, really challenging, and it's not one of the ones that I like a lot for that reason.
Then that might, if there's people that think like you, that might be why not reflected to the extent that the company thinks it should be. And John, the last question I can see is, in terms of the rest of world deal, are you looking to include an option for future partnership of 2591 in negotiations, or just limit the scope to trofinetide at this stage?
Yeah, very deliberately, it's just trofinetide. So we're not entertaining any discussions about 2591. We need to wait for the data for that. And as I mentioned, there are companies that have passed in the process who are very interested in 2591. So yeah, it's purely trofinetide for this process.
And I'm going to ask Mark, sort of a Dorothy Dixer. In the 23 years you've been publishing Bioshares, what are some of the recurring attributes you see in successful biotech healthcare companies?
Thanks. It's a good question, and it's a question I've sort of asked myself a lot over the years. Look, I'll start sort of. One of the things that's beneficial we've seen just from history is having a good entrepreneur behind the company. And you look at like a Paul Hopper, who was behind Viralytics, which got sold for 500 million. Look at Brian Liebman behind ResApp, which is sold for 100. So these sorts of people behind companies, they know how to sell them. So that's a positive thing. I think for the sector overall, it's really evolved from, we used to, 5 or 6 years ago, the sector was raising about $600 million a year. It's now raising about $1.7 billion a year. So 3 times that amount. So that's a really positive thing. When David and I first started up Bioshares, and we were really technology driven, and that was what really got us into the sector. We just loved the technology, what was happening. And I want to say after 23 years, technology is really a second thing, a second feature. If I look at the companies that have been successful, I would attribute so much of that success to the CEO, which might sound like a really strange thing to say, but if you look at companies like CSL, the most successful biotech company in Australia, with Brian McNamara, who's legendary status, Peter Farrell behind ResMed, Catherine Livingstone behind Cochlear, and then you look at the companies that are doing well, and and the risk of embarrassing some people, but they're run by some really dedicated and driven CEOs. Some people wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go for 10-kilometre runs and that sort of thing. You've got Chris at Tilix, Brad at Cogstate, Wayne at Anteris Technologies, and Philippe at Clinuvel. I mean, they're four of the best CEOs in the sector, and the companies are doing exceptionally well. So when you come across someone like that, they're just 100% determined to succeed at all costs. So that's probably the most successful attribute I've seen in a biotech, or that I look for now in a biotech company.
Oh, that's brilliant insights. Thank you very much. Now, we will have to wind it up now. The next webinar will be in November at a date to be decided. Dr. Tam Neuren, Horizon 3 Healthcare Investment Committee member, will be the host on that occasion, as he has in the past. So thank you to our audience, and your feedback and suggestions are most welcome. Thanks to FB Rice and Monsoon Communications for sponsoring and hosting this webinar. And finally, thank you again to Mark and John for joining us. And on behalf of the Horizon 3 Healthcare team, goodbye for now and good investing.
Thanks all.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Much appreciated. Okay, bye-bye.